Over a month ago, I found this mystery egg in my yard, behind my chicken coop. I live in the tropics, in the middle of a jungle, so my yard is full of the craziest giant and even venomous reptiles, including monitor lizards and cobras. I showed the egg to reptile experts, and the consensus was that it was some kind of lizard or snake, and some specifically mentioned cobra. But a few of the experts also suggested it was probably dead, seeing as it had been out of the ground and looked super dehydrated, judging from the huge dent it had. I tried to shine a light into it, a process called candling, to see if it had a fetus or arteries inside. I didn't see anything, so I assumed the egg was a dud. So instead of throwing the egg away, I decided to make use of the nutrients and buried it into the soil of my giant rainforest vivarium I call Pandora, home to an ecosystem of tropical plants, fungi, and animals. But to my surprise, after checking the egg again a month later, the egg still hadn't rotted like I thought it would, and the dent had eerily disappeared. Was the mystery egg actually alive? Was there a fetus developing inside now? This week, curiosity got the better of me, and I went back in to have a final look into the egg. What I found was not what I expected at all. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC fam. Enjoy. Our first limited edition AC Fuzzy collectible, Lady Deathstrike, now available at antscanada.com. Question: should I candle the mystery egg again? I thought it was dead, but it still hasn't rotted, even after over a month in my giant vivarium. Only thing is, I'm scared to touch it now. You guys said, don't touch it. If it hatches, let it. I had been watching this spot in the vivarium like a hawk, wondering if one day I would spot a hole in the soil caused by some baby animal emerging from the egg. The fact that even after all this time, it hadn't rotted was highly suspicious. But according to a community tab poll, most of you said I should leave it and let it hatch naturally. But a lot of you guys brought up a good point in the comments, saying that should a venomous snake like a cobra hatch from the egg, it would be in my best interest to find out if the egg was viable and see if a snake fetus was developing inside, so I could remove the egg and incubate it in a safe and secured container and not have it hatch in Pandora, where it would be hazardous to try to catch afterward. But on the other hand, the current environment in the soil seemed to be perfect for the egg's incubation. I was afraid if I touched it or moved it wrong, the egg may die if it was alive. I didn't know it yet, but this whole mystery egg situation would soon lead me to more questions, and I knew I had some serious decisions to make. But first, a crisis. See these random drops of water? I never thought anything of it, and assumed it was just runoff from daily automated rains in the rainforest. But upon further inspection, it seems the back of the moss wall was leaking behind the waterfall, which caused water to seep into an unsealed section of the framing and down this spot into the soil. I spotted water pooling in the lowest area of the vivarium and quickly dealt with the flood by using a vacuum to suck water from a hole I dug into the drainage layer, as I've done in the past the last time it flooded in Pandora, but now to deal with the leak behind the moss wall. There was just no way to get in there to patch up the leak, as the entire rock piece was completely silicone to the glass. The only solution I could think of was to disconnect the pump from the pipe that leads to the waterfall spout above. This way, it could stop the leak from behind the rock wall, and therefore the water entering the framing and ending up in the soil. But there was just one concern. Going in to make the necessary changes would be dangerous due to a certain beast who was possibly sleeping somewhere among the rocks. Godzilla wasn't on the bank basking, which meant he was in one of two places, sleeping in the mossy hill next to the pond, which is where I hoped he was, but at this point I couldn't see him. Or he could be hiding in his watery bedroom at the corner of the pond. I had no choice but to go in carefully and quickly to move the rocks and disconnect the filter pump beneath, watching carefully for any signs of a croc wanting to feast on my fingers. Okay, Godzilla, if you're here, please don't bite me. I'm not here to hurt you. Promise to be quick. I tried my best to work rapidly, placing my hand at the furthest spot away from where I knew Godzilla's rock bedroom was. So far, there was nothing. I worked blindly, feeling around with my fingers for the pump, which needed disconnection, preparing at any moment to pull away at the slightest movement or feeling of scales. And then, I did it. The pump was disconnected, and pulling my arm out of the water, I was happy that I still had all my fingers intact. Godzilla was nowhere in sight the whole time. Now the pond would just have to have circulating water as it passes through the filter until I could figure out how to restructure this part of the vivarium. But sadness started to sink in to see that Pandora, for the first time since its creation, no longer had a waterfall. At least for now. Later that day, I spotted Godzilla up on the rock bank, still wet, having emerged from the pond, which meant that the entire time I had my hand in the water, he had chosen not to bite me and simply lay quietly in hiding. Thank you, Godzilla. To reward him for not biting me, I recently collected these from my yard. Rhino beetle grubs. I suspect that it is currently rhino beetle grub season because I found a ton of these while gardening around my home. I took one and attempted to feed it to Godzilla. I opened the vivarium and moved in with my long tweezers. I dropped the beetle grub right in front of him, but it rolled. Ah! Okay, gotta pick that up. Whoa! That was close. Almost managed to bite my hand there, buddy. There! Ah! Man, that was the first time I've ever fed him directly from my tweezers, and I could truly feel the power of his bite. It feels like he would give quite the snap if he ever did manage to bite me. He proceeded to chew the beetle grub a bit, then moved towards the pond, where he stationed himself on the rock shelf. Looking back at the pit, thinking about the mystery egg again, I felt matters could get much worse if I didn't do anything to find out if the egg was viable. Imagine having to fish out some baby cobra or even a baby water monitor and having Godzilla living inside. I didn't want to put Godzilla's life in danger. This wasn't just about my safety, but also his. So I decided I should go ahead and try my luck and check the mystery egg. Okay. On second thought, maybe not. Godzilla decided to crawl into the pit and retire deep inside the mossy hill for the day. Alright, and scene. Guess I'd have to wait until he was out of here before going in to check out the egg. Meanwhile, I had a bowl full of rhino beetle grubs. And of course, I couldn't wait to add them into Pandora. I truly missed having rhino beetles in Pandora, and particularly loved when we had Rocksteady, our first rhino beetle, frolicking the forest. Before he died of natural causes, these rhino beetle grubs would help my dreams of bringing rhino beetles back to Pandora come to life. But little did I know, I was about to make a very grave mistake with their introduction. I placed the grubs onto a bare plot of earth in our rainforest. They immediately began to squirm around, hoping to dig deep into the protective soils. They were too vulnerable above ground like this. So to help them out, I began to dig into the earth to start a beginning burrow for them to assist their subterranean travels. But without even realizing it, this spot was perhaps the worst spot I could have ever chosen. It was a bit dark, so I didn't realize my mistake until it was too late. Hey, wait. Oh no! Marauder ants! Ah! I had unknowingly dug right into the nest of a marauder ant colony, and the ants were now swarming the grubs. I had delivered them a feast right to their doorstep. These ants had been largely MIA, and for weeks I had wondered where they were nesting. It was sad to get my answer in this way. I could do nothing but watch the carnage unfold as the grubs struggled to dig below the ground to escape the swarming ants. Some grubs did make it below ground, but to where? Marauder ant nest chambers? I felt terrible for this. Giant trapjaw ants were drawn to the scene. They could smell the beetle grubs, but also were aware of the swarms of marauders and were careful not to tread too close. One brave giant trapjaw risked it all by wandering through the swarming ants and struck at a marauder, sending it flying into oblivion. It was trying to move closer to the beetle grubs and discovered there were gnome ants also emerging on the scene. It moved closer and attempted to strike at oncoming marauder ants. At this point, there were only a few grubs still above ground. The rest had successfully burrowed, but whether it was to their safety or to their doom was a mystery. The remaining grubs began to weaken as the ants stung them to death. As for the giant trapjaw ants, one ant came close enough to smell a grub, but felt sticking around was much too risky, and they decided to bolt. The battle between marauder ants, beetle grubs, and giant trapjaws left me stunned. I had just made a serious realization. Some of you used to ask me in the comments how I'll know when I've added enough creatures into the rainforest. And I've always felt when our rainforest was quote-unquote full, I would see signs. Before I could simply add things into the vivarium without problems. But now that our rainforest ecosystem was super biodiverse and saturated, this incident was like a warning from Pandora that every choice I made now could have grave consequences, affecting many life forms. I had best choose my moves wisely when adding new things in from here on in, and that included creatures waiting to be born. Speaking of creatures born in our rainforest, atop the Hallelujah tree stump, a tiny head peeked out over the edge. It was Snip, our resident baby sunskink, basking in the morning light. An Asian bullet ant headed up the stump towards Snip, and my heart began to race. But the moment the ant made contact, it dashed away. It was not willing to mess with this reptile today. I marveled at the gorgeous blue iridescence Snip sported in the light. Now, Snip here was born in this rainforest, from sunskinks that used to live here, but that I released several months back. I'd initially thought he was the only baby here, until I spotted this one a couple weeks back. Snap, another baby sunskink, was on the prowl. It had just rained this morning, and this sunskink knew full well that this was the best time to hunt for critters that would be flooded out of their hiding spots. He used his superior vision and tongue to smell around for prey. Like a creeping tiger, the lizard made sure to move slowly, to avoid scaring off potential prey. It was truly incredible to watch. It looked up on the glass and all around. I could tell Snap was quite experienced at this and had done this many times now. What's amazing is these lizards are born live from their parents and then immediately leave their parents to live life in the rainforest on their own, with no parents to guide them and teach them the ways of survival. Hunting like this is self-learned and also encoded into their DNA. Now the thing is, I always wondered why Snap was never seen with Snip. They would always be in separate places of the tank. When one was basking on the stump, the other was hunting. I never saw them basking together, which was weird because their parents would bask together often. Oh well, guess we had a case of sunskink sibling rivalry. I soon caught sight of another creature, also on the hunt for prey. A jumping spider scaled the stump, making sure to keep close watch of the Asian bullet ants crawling everywhere. It had the perfect camouflage to blend into its surroundings, but still, it had to be careful. It turned to move towards the top of the stump. Another Asian bullet ant. And a dwarf ant. It was just crazy how visual these spiders are. It continued up the stump. It always amazed me how intelligent these spiders seem. It's almost like you could totally see the spider thinking, right? As it moved forward, it quickly pooped, then continued further up the stump like nothing happened. Crazy! Look at all those eyes! I also noticed that this female had lost a couple legs, evidence of how hostile the rainforest can be, even for a nimble and watchful jumping spider like her. She was super cute, and I hope she would eventually find the prey she was looking for, and not become prey herself. She inched dangerously close to the edge of the stump, where Snip was still basking nearby. My heart began to race as she came close to hopping over the edge where Snip could see her. But nope, she moved downwards toward the back of the stump, then leaped onto a leaf. Her spidey senses seemed well intact. She leaped again, but missed her landing target, and went back on her lifeline web. Let's go somewhere else, she thought. Seeing all these predators out hunting was a good sign that our ecosystem was ecosysteming. But little did I know, another predator in our rainforest would soon emerge to reveal itself, preying on the most unlikely creatures at night. Night fell in Pandora, and the signature mists covered the lands. I swear I could look at Pandora for hours at night. There was something just so relaxing about our rainforest's nocturnal aura. And tonight, I noticed the forest had formed a beautiful window, framing the moon with a windowsill of vegetation. I caught sight of a snow-colored roach. It had just molted, still white and vulnerable. It would take this roach, now a full adult, another 20 minutes or so to harden enough to start moving around. But in this state now, it had to remain still and rest for the duration of its hardening process, known as tanning. Check out the beautiful venation of its wings. Down in the moss, dwarf ants were eating edible parts from its old casted-off exoskeleton. It was awesome to see cool life events like this for our resident Pandoran creatures. Asian bullet ants were working the night shift. I noticed one had captured a young cricket and was bringing it back to the nest. Such a display of strength and coordination. A recently born huntsman spiderling was waiting in the shadows for size-appropriate prey to scuttle by. It too was missing a leg. What's with all these spiders missing legs? But I think the most surprising predator of all on this night was one that I didn't have on my Pandoran bingo card. A giant trapjaw ant was on the prowl for nocturnal prey creatures emerging to feed. It inspected the shadows below the stump, which was full of baby termite mounds. It had likely captured termites here before and was back to hopefully get lucky again. It had no idea, however, that this time, luck was not on its side. Whoa! What was that? Oh, it's just a dwarf ant. It suddenly felt a slight vibration from the darkness. Hey, what was that? Okay, guess it was nothing. Wait a sec. I smell something. A large looming figure emerged from the shadows. Bam! A canopy crab lunged and grabbed the giant trap giant with its claws and retreated backward into the shadowy cavern to begin feeding. Whoa! This is the very first time I'd ever witnessed this. I always knew these tropical canopy crabs as scavengers, but I had no idea they could also be predatory in nature. How crazy! The giant trapjaw ant could do nothing else but struggle with its mandibles wide open as the crab proceeded to feast at its body. I noticed Godzilla was still resting under the mossy hill, so I still couldn't go in to inspect the mystery egg. I had no choice but to wait until morning, and hopefully by then, Godzilla would be out of this place. The next morning, I looked into Pandora and was completely shocked. Snip was basking on the stump. And this time, so was Snap. How cute! Finally, the two had decided to choose peace and share the stump, though quite far apart from each other. It was still cute to see them sharing the basking spot. It totally reminded me of when I'd watch their parents basking at this same location. Man, the circle of life and passing of time is such a beautiful thing, wouldn't you say? Now, as for Godzilla, I was thrilled to see him in the pond, which meant the time had finally come. I had to be brave. It was now or never. I went into the vivarium to quench my thirst for the truth. It was time to carefully inspect the mystery egg. So my plan was to just partially move surrounding soil away and candle it inside Pandora to see if I could see anything. When the egg was partially uncovered, I grabbed my light. Okay, Sea Family, here goes nothing. My heart raced as I placed the flashlight up to the egg shell. Okay. I moved the flashlight around. I wasn't sure if I could see anything inside. How about you guys? Do you see a fetus? Or arteries? Now it seems like I kinda see something here. Could that be a tail? There were some areas where it kind of looked like tiny arteries, but also not. Okay, that's it. I decided to make an executive decision and actually take the egg out of the soil and inspect it properly. I candled the egg and looked again. It was still so hard to tell. then I noticed this on the shell surface. A small puncture. And these strange gashes. Did this mean the egg must finally be rotting now? A part of me was sad to discover this, because I guess it was a bit of a thrill anticipating what creature would be emerging from this egg. But I guess this is just the way of nature. Not all eggs make it. Sorry guys, for those of you who are hoping it would hatch. I placed it back into Pandora and buried it back up to continue rotting so it could release its nutrients into the soil. Another side of me, however, was relieved that I no longer had to worry about the danger of some venomous cobra emerging into Pandora, knowing that the egg was dead. Or was it? Vote in my community tab to affect this story.